I guess it's a way of, as you said, getting to know each other. And because you come all
Absolutely.
the way from the United States to China, and especially back then, I think people would naturally assume that there must be a good reason why you were there. You know, you
Mm.
are already
Yeah.
a friend from afar. And then they will chat with you
Yes.
as if you're, a friend. Are you married? How many
Yes.
kids? What job do you do? All
Yes.
these so-called
Yes.
personal questions.
Mm,
But I think
mm.
you get used to it after a
Yes.
while. Do you, Jason?
I mean, I've completely adapted. I don't even, actually. I'm not sure if I would be able to have a normal conversation in America anymore because I'm not sure what's off the table anymore.
Ah, yeah, different.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. I know one thing, Jason. Jason, how long have you been here? Remind me again.
Just over 10 years.
Okay, so you're good for you. You hit the 10. 10's the first big match. Well, five's the first magic number. 10's the second big magic
Mm.
number. Good for you.
So,
Good for you.
Mr. Ma, so you
Go ahead,
you
baby.
came to China back in 1999. That was
Mm.
early.
Mm.
Well, how did you
Yeah.
decide to stay? Like, were you here just for a
Mm.
job
Right.
or for a visit? And
Right. I came with my friend Frank. He wanted. We were making an effort because there were back then, mostly in Chongqing and Chengdu, because the U.S. consulate was there. So there were some guys back then in Chengdu, businessmen who had a lot of money, and they wanted to meet business people in America
Mhm.
to try and do business and do joint ventures. And we were serving to introduce them to each
Mm.
other, like the Chamber of Commerce does, right?
Mhm.
So that was the purpose of our trips, and that's terrific, right? So that was the purpose. But I didn't have a pleasant. I had a wonderful job, a wonderful new career start in. It just happened to be timing in Newport Beach. I was for 3 years. I had a new job position. The offices of the company I was working for was right on Newport Harbor. So outside my office window was the yachts on Newport Harbor.
Mhm.
So it was a wonderful life. But that company literally just happened to go out of business after 3 years. So I was in between projects.
Mm.
I've always been an independent person as an entrepreneur. I've always been a professional speaker, a trainer. I'm always in front of people.
Mm.
Okay, so it's very comfortable for me. I teach camera skills, all this stuff. So I've always been in media and communications. So I happen to be not tied to a specific contract at that time when I got invited to China. So I didn't have much to go back home to. It was like, okay, wait a minute, because I arrived in China, and then there was a small chamber of commerce, and then I'll tell you what happened. Two key things happened.
Mm.
I came and we mostly spent our time in Chengdu, again, because of the U.S. consulate. Back then, it was easy as a citizen to get in. You could like walk in the front door of the U.S. consulate
Mm.
because back then it wasn't as formal as it is now. And for example, the consul general's brother was a priest, and he was visiting, and he was staying at the consulate, and he was studying Chinese medicine at Huaxida, which is the famous Chinese medicine TCM University on Renminlu in downtown Chengdu, a couple of kilometers from the consulate. So here was his brother, the priest, who was studying TCM at the university. Amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then his brother on Sundays would do mass. I'm Italian Catholic. His brother on Sundays would do mass at the consulate. So we had our little community of maybe 10 people. So we'd meet at the consulate. So now I was getting involved in the community. I was starting to develop a life. And then then the second thing that happened was Motorola grabbed me and asked me to start doing business communications training for them. Motorola was the one back then, remember? Back then, the foreign world was Motorola, Siemens, and Volkswagen. That was like, they were the top of the world here in China, those three companies. And funny how things change, right? So I started doing work for Motorola. They sent me to Beijing, which was my first trip to Beijing for some training. I couldn't believe it. I was hooked, right? I went to Beijing.
What
I was
about
like,
Beijing?
wow. And then then back to Chengdu. And then the third thing that happened is we left, we came back. We left, we came back. So we had like 3 trips over the course of maybe 3 months apart. So 我来来去去3次. I came back 3 times. So then the consulate finally had an important big project which they invited me to participate in. And that was that China was entering the WTO, and then the United States, the Chengdu consulate with the Chengdu Foreign Affairs Office and Sichuan MAFTEC and the Chongqing Overseas Affairs Office all together organized a series of WTO seminars all over the province for business people in China to explaining to them what it meant that China was entering the WTO. And they asked me to be one of the businessmen speakers during that conference. And so things just started adding up. And then, okay, so you tell me, you come knocking on my hotel, baby, let's say it's you, because it was my friend, Mr. Lee, my friend Frank, the Chongqing guy, comes knocking on my door. Mario, yeah, pack your bag. Tomorrow we're going back to Guangzhou. And I looked at him and I went, nope, you're going back to Guangzhou. I'm staying here. And he went, you are? I go, yep, I rented an apartment. And that was it. That was it. Just like
Nice.
that. Within the first year, I was like, it's better to stay than to go back.
All
And
these
that was the bottom line.
opportunities.
Hello.